The Great Hall of the Federation Council stretched for nearly a mile in every direction. Its ceiling rose so high that clouds sometimes formed near the top, drifting lazily beneath lights that mimicked distant stars. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood at the entrance, her small human frame dwarfed by the massive doorway designed for species 3 times her size. She took a deep breath and stepped inside. Around her, thousands of delegates from hundreds of worlds filled the curved seating that rose like mountains on all sides. The Vorthan delegation occupied the northern section, their crystalline bodies catching the light and scattering rainbows across the floor. The Krell sat in climate-controlled pods that kept them at temperatures that would freeze a human solid. The Mindari floated in their anti-gravity fields, their gas-formed bodies swirling with colors that represented their emotional states. And at the center of it all, on a platform that could be seen from every seat in the hall, stood the High Council. 7 beings of different species, elected to guide the Federation through its greatest challenges. Today, they faced perhaps their greatest challenge yet. "The hegemony has crossed the neutral line," declared High Counselor Vrex, his massive insectoid body clicking with each word. "They have destroyed 3 research stations and killed over 10,000 Federation citizens. They demand we surrender all territory in the Outer Rim or face total war." A wave of fear rippled through the hall. Sarah could feel it, even though humans lacked the psychic sensitivity that many species possessed. The hegemony was the oldest and most powerful military force in the known galaxy. They had conquered dozens of species before the Federation had even formed. Their ships were nearly impossible to destroy, their soldiers were genetically engineered for combat, and their leaders cared nothing for diplomatic solutions. "We must fight," growled Admiral Torex of the Krell. Ice crystals formed on his breath as he spoke. "The hegemony respects only strength. If we show weakness now, they will devour us piece by piece." "Fight with what?" asked Representative Salyum of the Mindari, their gas body turning a worried shade of purple. "Our combined fleet is less than a quarter of their size. We would be destroyed in weeks." The argument continued for hours. Some wanted to fight and die with honor. Others wanted to surrender and hope for mercy. A few suggested fleeing to the far reaches of the galaxy and starting over. None of these plans offered any real hope. Sarah listened to it all, her mind racing. Humanity had only joined the Federation 50 years ago, making them one of the newest members. They had little political power and even less military strength. Their fleet consisted of just 18 ships, barely enough to patrol their own solar system. By every measure, humans were one of the weakest species in the Federation. But Sarah had studied the hegemony. She had spent 20 years reading everything she could find about them. She knew their history, their culture, their beliefs, and she knew something that no one else in this room seemed to understand. "I request permission to address the Council," Sarah said, her voice amplified by the translation systems that made communication possible between species. High Counselor Vrex's compound eyes focused on her. "The human delegation wishes to speak. Very well, you have the floor, Ambassador Chen." Sarah walked to the center platform, feeling the weight of thousands of eyes upon her. She was just one small human, standing before the collected might of 100 worlds. Her heart pounded in her chest, but she kept her voice steady. "The hegemony has not attacked us because they want territory," she began. "They have not attacked us because they want resources. They have attacked us because they are afraid." Laughter echoed through the hall. The hegemony afraid. The greatest military power in the galaxy, afraid of a loose alliance of peaceful species. "Please," Sarah continued, raising her hand for silence. "Let me explain. The hegemony has ruled through fear for 10,000 years, but in the last century something has changed. The Federation has grown, not just in size but in strength. Not military strength, but something they fear much more." She pulled up a holographic display that showed the Federation's growth over the past 100 years. Trade routes expanded across the map. Scientific discoveries multiplied. Cultural exchanges flourished. Quality of life indicators rose on every world. "We have shown that cooperation is more powerful than conquest," Sarah said. "That working together creates more wealth, more happiness, more progress than any empire built on slavery and fear, and the people of the hegemony are starting to notice." She changed the display to show reports from inside hegemony space, resistance movements, underground networks, refugees fleeing toward Federation territory. "The hegemony's rulers are not afraid of our ships. They are afraid of our ideas. They attack us not because they think they will lose a war, but because they know they are already losing the peace." High Counselor Vrex leaned forward, his clicking sounds taking on a thoughtful tone. "What do you suggest we do with this information, Ambassador?" Sarah took another deep breath. This was the moment that would change everything. "I suggest we talk to them." The laughter this time was even louder. Talk to the hegemony. One might as well talk to a supernova. The hegemony had never negotiated in good faith. They saw diplomacy as a sign of weakness, something to be exploited. "Not their leaders," Sarah clarified. "Their people, their soldiers, their workers, the billions of beings who live under hegemony rule and have never known anything else. We need to show them that there is another way." She outlined her plan. It was risky. It was unprecedented. It went against everything the Federation had ever tried. But as she spoke, Sarah saw something change in the eyes of the delegates around her. Fear began to transform into hope. "I volunteer to lead the mission myself," Sarah concluded. "If I fail, you lose nothing but one human ambassador. If I succeed, we might end this war before it truly begins." The High Council conferred among themselves for several minutes. When they turned back to face the hall, High Counselor Vrex spoke. "The Council has decided. Ambassador Chen, you have 1 month. May the stars guide your path." Sarah bowed and walked back to her seat. Her hands were shaking, but her mind was clear. She had just been given the most dangerous assignment in Federation history, and she intended to succeed. The diplomatic ship Olive Branch was the smallest vessel in the Federation fleet. It carried no weapons, no shields, and barely enough fuel to reach hegemony space and return. Its crew consisted of just 5 people, all human volunteers who understood they might never come home. Sarah stood on the bridge, watching the stars streak past as they traveled faster than light. Beside her stood Commander James Wright, a veteran pilot who had survived 3 tours in the Outer Rim. Behind them worked Dr. Elena Vasquez, the Federation's leading expert on hegemony biology, and Marcus Cole, a communications specialist who spoke 17 languages. The 5th member of their team, Dr. Yuki Tanaka, was in the cargo hold, preparing the supplies they would need. "Ambassador," Wright said, his voice tight with concern, "we're receiving a transmission from Hegemony Command. They've detected our approach." "Put it through," Sarah replied. The view screen filled with the face of a hegemony officer. Like all members of the ruling caste, he was tall, heavily muscled, and covered in thick gray scales. His eyes were cold and predatory. "Federation vessel, you have entered hegemony space. You will be destroyed in 60 seconds. This is your only warning." "Hegemony Command, this is Ambassador Sarah Chen of the Federation. I am here to deliver a message to your Supreme Commander, a message that could save billions of lives." The officer laughed, a harsh sound like rocks grinding together. "The Federation sends one tiny ship to save billions of lives. Your arrogance is amusing. Prepare to die." "If you destroy us," Sarah said calmly, "you will never know what message we carried. And when the war ends, as all wars end, you will always wonder if you could have prevented the deaths of your own people. Is that a risk your Supreme Commander would want you to take?" The officer hesitated. Behind him, Sarah could see other figures moving, whispering among themselves. Curiosity was a powerful force, even among warriors. "Hold position," the officer finally said. I will consult with my superiors. If you attempt to move, you will be destroyed." The transmission ended. Wright let out a long breath he had been holding. That was either very brave or very stupid, Ambassador. "Probably both," Sarah admitted. "But it bought us time. That's all we need right now." They waited for 3 hours. During that time, more hegemony ships arrived, surrounding the olive branch on all sides. 12 battle cruisers, each one large enough to carry a small city. Their weapons were powered and ready. Finally, a new transmission came through. This time, the face on the screen was different. It belonged to Supreme Commander Krath, the absolute ruler of the hegemony. His scales were darker than the others, almost black, and covered in scars from countless battles. His eyes held intelligence as well as cruelty. "Human," he said, his voice deep and resonant. "You have traveled far to die. What message do you carry that is worth such a foolish sacrifice?" Sarah stood straight, meeting his gaze without fear. "Supreme Commander, I come not with threats or demands but with an offer that could benefit both our peoples." "The Federation has nothing we want," Krath replied. "We will take what we need." "With respect, Supreme Commander, that is not entirely true." Sarah pulled up another holographic display. "Your empire is vast, but it is struggling. Your economy depends on conquest because your systems cannot produce enough to support your population. Your military is powerful, but stretched thin across hundreds of occupied worlds. And your people are beginning to question whether endless war is truly the path to greatness." Krath's eyes narrowed dangerously. "You speak of matters that do not concern you." "They concern everyone," Sarah replied. "Because the path you are on leads only to destruction, not just for the Federation but for the hegemony as well. You cannot conquer the entire galaxy. Eventually, you will face an enemy too strong to defeat. And when that happens, everything you have built will crumble." "Is this your message? Predictions of our doom?" Krath's voice dripped with contempt. "We have heard such prophecies before. They have always been wrong." "No, Supreme Commander. My message is different." Sarah took a step closer to the screen. "I am here to offer you something the hegemony has never had. A partner instead of a subject. A friend instead of a slave." She explained her proposal. Trade agreements that would benefit both sides. Technology exchanges that could solve the hegemony's resource problems. Cultural programs that would allow citizens of both powers to learn from each other. A gradual process of integration that would make war unnecessary. "And in exchange?" Krath asked, his expression unreadable. "In exchange, you stop the attack. You return to the neutral line, and you give peace a chance." For a long moment, Krath said nothing. Then he laughed, a deep booming sound that seemed to shake the very ship. "You are either the bravest creature I have ever met or the most foolish, perhaps both." He leaned closer to the screen. "I will consider your proposal, but do not think this means I believe it will succeed. I am simply curious." "That is all I ask," Sarah replied. "You will come aboard my flagship, alone. If your proposal has merit, we will discuss it further. If it does not, you will die. Do you accept these terms?" Sarah looked at her crew. Wright was shaking his head, his eyes pleading with her not to go. Vasquez and Cole looked terrified, but they all knew there was only one answer she could give. "I accept." An hour later, Sarah stood in the shuttle bay, wearing nothing but her diplomatic uniform. No weapons, no communication devices, nothing that could be seen as a threat. Wright grabbed her arm as she was about to board the shuttle. "Ambassador, Sarah, please reconsider. We can still run. It's not too late." Sarah smiled and placed her hand over his. "James, if I don't come back, tell the council that I tried, and tell them not to give up hope. Humans have survived worse than this. We always find a way." She stepped into the shuttle and watched through the window as the olive branch grew smaller and smaller. Ahead of her loomed the massive hegemony flagship, its dark hull bristling with weapons. It looked like a predator waiting to strike. But Sarah was not afraid. Fear was a luxury she could not afford. She had a mission to complete, and nothing would stop her from seeing it through. The inside of the Hegemony flagship was nothing like Sarah had expected. She had imagined dark corridors filled with weapons and military equipment. Instead, she found wide hallways decorated with artwork and sculptures. Gardens grew under artificial lights. Music played softly from hidden speakers. Her escort, a young Hegemony officer named Vex, noticed her surprise. "You thought we were only warriors," he said, his voice carrying a hint of amusement. "I apologize for my assumptions," Sarah replied. "Your culture is more complex than I realized." Vex led her through the ship, pointing out various features. Here was the library, containing records of Hegemony history going back thousands of years. There was the training center, where young officers learned not just combat but philosophy and strategy. And in the central dome, a memorial to the millions who had died building the Hegemony into what it was today. "We do not fight because we love war," Vex explained. "We fight because we believe it is necessary for survival. The galaxy is a dangerous place. The weak are destroyed. Only the strong survive." "Is that what you believe?" Sarah asked. Vex was silent for a moment. "It is what I was taught, but lately I have begun to wonder if there might be another way." Before Sarah could respond, they arrived at the command center. Supreme Commander Krath sat on a massive throne carved from a single piece of black stone. Around him stood his most trusted advisors, all watching Sarah with expressions that ranged from curiosity to hostility. "Ambassador Chen," Krath said, "you have seen some of my ship. What do you think?" "I think your people have built something remarkable," Sarah answered honestly. "And I think it would be a tragedy to see it destroyed in a war that neither side can truly win." Krath gestured for her to approach. "You speak of partnership, of friendship. These are concepts my people understand, but only among ourselves. Why should we extend them to outsiders?" Sarah climbed the steps to stand before his throne. She was barely tall enough to meet his eyes even when he was seated. "Because the galaxy is changing," she said. "When the Hegemony began, you were one of the few advanced civilizations. Now there are hundreds. You cannot conquer them all, but you could work with them. You could lead them not through fear but through example." "Lead the Federation," one of the advisors laughed. "They are a collection of weak species who refuse to fight. What could they possibly offer us?" "Everything you lack," Sarah replied, turning to face the advisor. "Scientific knowledge, medical technology, agricultural techniques. The Federation has specialists in fields you have never developed because you were too focused on military conquest." She pulled out a small device from her pocket and projected a series of images. "This is a water purification system developed by the Mindari. It could triple the drinking water available on your agricultural worlds. This is a disease treatment created by the Vorthan. It could save millions of your citizens who die each year from preventable illness. This is a crop enhancement process from the Krell. It could feed your growing population without needing to conquer new planets." The advisors murmured among themselves. Even Krath leaned forward, interested despite himself. "And you would share these things freely?" he asked. "Through fair trade agreements," Sarah confirmed. "The Federation gains security. The Hegemony gains prosperity. Everyone wins." "Everyone except the military," growled another advisor, this one wearing the insignia of a fleet commander. "If there is no war, what becomes of us?" Sarah had anticipated this question. "The galaxy is full of threats beyond our borders: pirates, rogue AI systems, natural disasters that require massive response forces. Your military would not become useless. It would become essential for protecting all of our people, not just your own." The debate continued for hours. Sarah answered every question, addressed every concern, and never lost her patience even when the advisors grew hostile. She spoke of history, both human and alien. She shared stories of wars that had ended in friendship and conflicts that had destroyed both sides. Finally, as the ship's artificial day turned to night, Krath raised his hand for silence. "Ambassador Chen, you have given me much to consider. I will think on your words. Return to your ship and wait for my decision." Sarah bowed. "Thank you, Supreme Commander. I hope you choose wisely." As Vex led her back to the shuttle bay, he spoke quietly. "You made an impression today. Some of the advisors are afraid of you now." "Afraid? Why?" "Because you did something no one has ever done before. You made the Supreme Commander doubt. And for people who have built their entire lives on certainty, doubt is the most dangerous weapon of all." Sarah returned to the olive branch as the ship's night cycle began. Her crew surrounded her immediately, asking questions and checking her for injuries. "I'm fine," she assured them, "and I think we might actually have a chance." But as she lay in her bunk that night, staring at the ceiling, Sarah wondered if she had done enough. The hegemony had ruled through strength for 10,000 years. Could words really change that? Could one human really make a difference against an empire that spanned hundreds of worlds? She thought about Earth, about the billions of people back home who had no idea what was happening out here. They trusted their leaders to keep them safe. They trusted Sarah to find a way. "I won't let you down," she whispered to no one. "I promise." The next morning, a message arrived from the flagship. Supreme Commander Krath requested another meeting. But this time, he wanted Sarah to bring her entire crew. Something had changed. Sarah did not know if it was good or bad, but she knew that the next few hours would determine the fate of trillions of lives across the galaxy. The command center of the Hegemony flagship felt different when Sarah returned with her crew. The advisors were still present, but their expressions had changed. Some looked thoughtful, others looked angry, a few looked almost hopeful. Supreme Commander Krath sat on his throne, but his posture was less rigid than before. He watched the humans approach with an expression that Sarah could not quite read. "I have spent the night reviewing your proposal," he said without preamble. "I have also reviewed the history of your species." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. Human history was not always something to be proud of. Wars, genocides, environmental destruction. They had overcome much, but the scars remained. "Your people interest me," Krath continued. "You are weak. Your bodies are fragile. Your technology is inferior. By all measures, you should have been conquered long ago." "But we weren't," Sarah replied quietly. "No, you weren't." Krath stood, his massive form towering over everyone in the room. "Instead, you survived ice ages, plagues, and wars. You fought among yourselves for thousands of years, and yet you did not destroy yourselves. And when you finally reached the stars, you did not come to conquer. You came to explore, to learn, to make friends." He descended from his throne and walked towards Sarah, stopping just a few feet away. Up close, she could see the countless scars that covered his scales, evidence of a lifetime of battle. "My advisors tell me you are dangerous," he said. "Not because of your weapons, but because of your ideas. They say if we allow your way of thinking to spread, it will destroy everything the hegemony has built." "And what do you think?" Sarah asked. Krath was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer than before. "I think I am tired of war. I have led armies for 60 years. I have conquered worlds and crushed rebellions and buried more soldiers than I can count. And what has it achieved? More enemies, more fear, more death." He turned to face his advisors. "The ambassador is right. We cannot conquer the entire galaxy. And even if we could, what would be the point? We would rule over ashes and corpses. That is not the legacy I want to leave." The fleet commander stepped forward, his face twisted with rage. "You cannot be serious. The Federation is weak. This is our chance to crush them forever." "And then what?" Krath demanded. "We crush the Federation and then we face the collective. We crush the collective and then we face the Empire. There is always another enemy, another war. When does it end?" It ends when we are the strongest, the commander shouted. No, Krath said firmly. It ends when we choose to end it. He turned back to Sarah. Ambassador Chen, I am prepared to accept your proposal, but I have conditions. Sarah felt hope surge through her chest, but she kept her expression neutral. Name them. First, the transition must be gradual. My people have lived one way for 10,000 years. They cannot change overnight. We will need time to adjust, to build trust, to learn new ways of thinking. Agreed. Second, the hegemony will retain its military forces, not to conquer but to protect. If there are threats beyond our borders, we will face them together. Agreed. Third, Krath paused, and for the first time he looked uncertain. Third, I want you to teach us, not just your technology but your way of thinking. How do you build cooperation instead of conquest? How do you create loyalty without fear? These are things my people have forgotten. We need to learn them again. Sarah felt tears forming in her eyes, but she blinked them back. It would be our honor, Supreme Commander. Then we have an agreement. Krath extended his massive hand. I believe this is how your people seal bargains. Sarah reached up and clasped his hand. Her fingers could barely wrap around one of his, but the gesture meant more than words could express. Wait, the fleet commander drew his weapon, pointing it at Sarah. I will not allow this. The hegemony does not surrender to weaklings. Before Sarah could react, Commander Wright stepped in front of her, shielding her with his own body. Dr. Vasquez grabbed a chair, ready to throw it. Marcus Cole raised his hands, trying to calm the situation. But it was Vex, the young officer who had escorted Sarah earlier, who moved fastest. He tackled the fleet commander from behind, knocking the weapon from his hands. Traitor, the commander screamed as guards dragged him away. You doom us all. Krath watched him go with a sad expression. He was my friend once. We fought together in many battles, but he cannot see what I see. He cannot understand that there are other kinds of strength. He turned to Vex. You showed courage today, young one. That will not be forgotten. Vex bowed. The ambassador showed me that courage is not always about fighting. Sometimes it is about hopping. Sarah placed her hand on Vex's arm. Thank you, you saved my life. You saved far more, Vex replied. You saved all of us. The following days were a whirlwind of activity. Messages flew back and forth between the Hegemony flagship and Federation headquarters. Negotiations continued around the clock, hammering out the details of the agreement. And then, exactly 1 month after Sarah had first proposed her plan to the Federation Council, an official announcement was made to both powers. The Hegemony and the Federation had signed a peace treaty, not just a ceasefire but a true partnership. Trade would begin immediately. Cultural exchanges would follow. And for the first time in 10,000 years, the hegemony would stop expanding through conquest. The galaxy would never be the same. The Great Hall of the Federation Council was even more crowded than it had been 1 month ago. Now, representatives from the hegemony stood among the delegates, their gray scales contrasting with the brilliant colors of the other species around them. Sarah stood on the central platform once again, but this time she was not alone. Supreme Commander Krath stood beside her, along with the entire crew of the Olive Branch. Behind them, a massive screen displayed images from worlds across the galaxy, showing celebrations that had erupted when the peace treaty was announced. High Counselor Vrex addressed the assembly, his clicking voice amplified to reach every corner of the vast hall. Today, we gather to recognize an achievement that many believed impossible. 1 month ago, we faced the prospect of a war that would have killed billions. Today, we celebrate a peace that could last for generations. The delegates erupted in applause. The sound echoed through the hall like thunder, a roar of relief and joy and hope. This achievement is the result of many efforts, Vrex continued. But it began with one person. One human who dared to believe that enemies could become friends. one ambassador who risked her life to deliver a message of peace. He turned to face Sarah. Ambassador Sarah Chen, on behalf of the Federation Council and all the peoples of the galaxy, I am honored to present you with the title of champion. A gasp went through the hall. The title of champion had been awarded only twice in Federation history, both times to leaders who had saved entire species from extinction. It was the highest honor any being could receive. Sarah stepped forward, her heart pounding. High Counselor, I am deeply honored, but I did not do this alone. My crew risked their lives alongside me. Supreme Commander Krath had the courage to choose peace over war, and countless others on both sides worked tirelessly to make this agreement possible. She paused, looking out at the assembled delegates. But more than that, I want to recognize something that goes beyond individual efforts. This peace was possible because of an idea. The idea that cooperation is stronger than conquest, that understanding is more powerful than fear, that the universe is big enough for all of us. This idea did not come from me. It came from humanity, from a species that learned through thousands of years of struggle that our differences make us stronger. We fought each other for most of our history, but we also learned to talk to each other, to trade with each other, to forgive each other. When humanity joined the Federation, we did not bring great fleets or advanced weapons. We brought something more valuable. We brought hope. Hope that even the oldest enemies can become the closest friends. Hope that even the deepest wounds can heal. Hope that the future can be better than the past. She turned to face Krath. Supreme Commander, you asked me to teach your people how we build cooperation. The truth is, we are still learning ourselves. But we will learn together, and together we will build something greater than either of our peoples could achieve alone. Krath nodded, his scarred face softening into something that might have been a smile. When I first met this human, I thought she was foolish, who comes to face an enemy fleet with nothing but words, but now I understand. Words can be more powerful than weapons, ideas can be more dangerous than armies, and hope, he paused, his voice thick with emotion. Hope is the most powerful force in the universe. He reached into his belt and drew a ceremonial dagger, ancient and beautiful. The hall fell silent, tension crackling through the air. But instead of pointing it at Sarah, Krath reversed the blade and offered it to her handle first. This dagger has been carried by every Supreme Commander for 3,000 years, he said. It represents the old way, the way of blood and conquest. Today, I give it to you. Keep it as a reminder of what we were, and let it inspire us to become something better. Sarah accepted the dagger with trembling hands. She knew what this meant. It was not just a gift. It was a surrender, not of the hegemony to the Federation, but of the old way to the new. I accept this gift, she said, not as a trophy of victory, but as a promise of partnership. From this day forward, the blade will never be used in anger. It will remind us instead of the courage it takes to choose peace over war. The hall exploded in cheers. Delegates embraced each other, some crying, some laughing. Even the stoic hegemony officers looked moved. For the first time in 10,000 years, the galaxy was truly united. In the weeks and months that followed, the changes came swiftly. Trade ships began flowing between Federation and hegemony space. Scientists from both sides collaborated on projects that had seemed impossible before. Cultural exchanges brought new art, new music, and new ideas to billions of beings who had never known anything but war. There were challenges, of course. Old hatreds did not disappear overnight. Some on both sides resisted the changes, but the momentum of peace proved stronger than the pull of conflict. 1 year after the treaty, Sarah returned to Earth for the first time since her mission began. She stood on a hillside overlooking the city where she had been born, watching the sun set over the ocean. The sky blazed with colors that no hologram could capture. Commander Wright found her there, standing alone in the fading light. "Ambassador, there's a transmission for you, from the Federation Council." "Can it wait?" "They say it's urgent. Something about expanding the peace treaty to include 3 more powers that want to join. Sarah smiled, still watching the sunset. 3 more powers. A year ago, we nearly went to war with one. Now 3 more want to join the peace. You started something, Ambassador, something that can't be stopped. She turned to face him. No, James, humanity started something. A long time ago on this very planet, when we first learned to talk to each other instead of killing each other. Everything since then has just been continuation. She looked up at the sky, where the first stars were beginning to appear. Somewhere out there, trillions of beings were looking at those same stars. Some had been her enemies. Now they were her friends. Tell the council I'm on my way, she said. The work continues. As she walked toward the shuttle that would carry her back to the stars, Sarah thought about everything that had happened. She had gone into hegemony space expecting to die. Instead, she had changed the galaxy. But she knew the truth. She was not special. Any human could have done what she did, because humanity itself was special. A species that had learned, through countless failures and heartbreaks and triumphs, that the only way forward was together. The galaxy had called them weak, had laughed at their small ships and fragile bodies, but in the end, humanity had done what no one else could. They had turned enemies into friends. They had replaced fear with hope. They had shown that the strongest force in the universe was not weapons or technology or military might. It was the simple, stubborn, beautiful belief that tomorrow could be better than today. And with that belief, humanity had changed everything. Forever,